podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and it might be a little bit early if you're listening to this. We are actually recording this on Saturday morning, and I am joined by Mr. Kevin Durso, as always. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right, and as you can see on the YouTube channel, search YWT podcast over there. Kevin has his board updated a little bit, and it's got all our social media on it, including at YWT Podcast, the show, at Kevin_Durso for Kevin, at Flyerdelphia, at Sports Talk PHL, and SportsTalkPhilly.com. So check us out over there.
Geez, yeah, I didn't even realize that's all of them, with the exception of producer Mike. That's about it.
Nah, Mike's fine.
No, I know, but I'm saying that's about it. I didn't realize it was everything when it's just the two of us on here, you know?
He promotes his own Twitter enough on our Twitter. So if you follow us on at YWT Podcast, you'll see tweets from at Mike Giletto, and it'll be fine. But either way,
I'm not gonna lie. I'm doing the same thing with the Flyerdelphia account during games.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the Flyerdelphia account, I don't think it was a fun day running that account yesterday, was it?
Well, I don't think it's ever a fun day when you're not able to use your graphics. You know,
specially made up graphics.
Well, and here's the thing: like, I even got a little creative yesterday with it. I was playing around with some stuff. Got the every team's got their own playoff logo, so I even had that integrated. Like, I put that on the lineup ones, and I had it faded, and I had it faded into the start of the game and stuff like that. And I kind of fooled around with instead of just something that's very generic at the end, just says final or whatever, I actually put the score into it. And I was hoping that, we could have a little line at the bottom that says Flyers lead series 2-0. Not the case, not even close to the case. I mean, yesterday was one of those rare occasions for me where the recap is written 2 periods in, and you just are waiting to couple more paragraphs, update the stats, and
you're hoping you don't have to add a paragraph about an injury. That's all you're doing at that point.
I'm trying to, and here's the thing. I'm trying to step up my game a little bit with content, because you almost have to. The onus is on me to do that when everybody else is paying attention. I mean, I was on the air 4 times this week, which I don't think has ever been the case.
I think all Philadelphia Flyers content creators are kind of putting their best foot forward right now, because we have the eyes of the city for the moment.
Sure, and you have to be mindful of that. So I tried to figure out a way to do it, and I've kind of gotten into this habit now of game recap, takeaways, and then a quote piece, something on whatever I get media-wise when I do the calls. And let's just say the quote piece was dropped in my lap. It's being put out there on Saturday morning, so I haven't put it out there yet. It's written, it's drafted, it's done. It took me 10 minutes to write because there were too many good quotes to not fill up, but 60% of it was what Elaine Vigneault said. That was about it. I didn't have to worry about it. The rest of it, though, and I don't even it's hard to get the takeaways done in a timely manner sometimes, because I'm trying to get the recap posted and then go on the media call, kind of process everything and go, all right, now I'm going to finally take 15 minutes to not think about something, go sit down and get this done. And that's how I did game 1. It was, let's get it figured out. Let's, here's the 5 thoughts. Okay, go ahead.
And by the way, that's right around the time frame that we'll actually be jumping on live on Tuesday, right after you post that article, right? Probably right about when you post article, you'll be jumping on live with us.
Yeah, what'll end up happening is,
Our announcement here is, in addition to today being a little bit of a short show, since we're doing it early and it's going to be a little shorter, we didn't want to short you guys the content for the week. So Tuesday night, we're going to do another live stream, kind of like we did after the Bruins game. That was the Bruins game, right?
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. We had a good time with it. And we're going to do it again on Tuesday. And I don't know how long we'll stay online, but, we'll come and hang out and do a little bit of a show. So I wanted to throw that out there pretty early in the show. So if you listen to it, you'll know to find us right after the game goes live. It'll be on Facebook again. And you'll be able to download it as a podcast the next morning. We'll make sure that Mike gets it up. So
yeah, absolutely. And then, so first of all, that'd be good listening for in between 2 games that we know are happening now. So you got Tuesday and Wednesday back to back. So that'll be great. And I'll have to see how my afternoon goes with that, because that's a 3:00 game. Recap posted, get on the media call for as much as I can. Anyway, maybe be on 97.3 before coming on to do the podcast with YWT. So it could be a really busy afternoon. But
it's a good time.
That's the best kind of afternoon,
And if the Flyers win, it's a great day. If the Flyers do what they did yesterday in game 2, maybe not so much. So quick recap here. The wheels fall off Canadiens 5-0. That's kind of the end of it. That's the recap.
Right. Well, and that's the recap for game 2. I mean, the good news is that we're not on here talking about it like game 1. It's not game
right.
1-1-0. It's 1-1 in the series. That's a good thing. I mean, take game 1 for whatever you want to take it for.
Game 1 sure looks like a great game now.
Exactly. I mean, things can be problems without being a big problem until it becomes a problem in terms of you lost a game. You know what I mean? Like, it's not as big of a problem when you win. You know, so we didn't
There's
sit
certain
back.
things you can overlook, right? You
like,
overlook a lot of issues.
Nobody sat there after game 1 and said, "Oh, look, another game where the top 6 didn't score."
Right.
You know, and let's put it this way.
Well, some people did because there are Facebook comments, but
yes, and look, technicality, because at the time the game went final, nobody in the top 6 other than Joel Farabee had scored, and it quickly was changed, and Jake Voracek had a power play goal. But
it was a shame for Farabee getting his first power play goal or his first playoff goal taken away, but we'll take it.
For Provorov?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Farabee's
was great. I mean, Farabee's goal was what you were looking for in game 2. You were waiting for that response, and it didn't come at 1-0. At 2-0 was when you were hoping for it, I think. And because I think if you score a goal either in the first period or early in the second, you might turn that game around.
I was looking for either a goal late in the first to cut that lead in half, go into the locker room with some momentum, or a quick response goal like this team has done a couple of times on the 3-0 goal, right? Like if Montreal scores to go up 3-0 and then Phil Myers comes down the wing 8 seconds later and rips a clapper that goes in, 3-1's a whole different animal. And I was looking for that response, that pushback, and it never really came.
Yeah, the issue I have with the 3-0 goal is it's the timing of it, because you take a penalty that maybe shouldn't have been called.
Definitely shouldn't have been called.
Here's the thing. He makes a motion. Gostisbehere makes a motion that looks like it's going to be a hold, and the official in center ice calls it. I don't like when the official in center ice calls something that he's not on top of. My eyes.
I don't like when the official in center ice calls icing if he's not sure of the race.
Right, but here's the thing. Like, I get it. We can't see everything on the broadcasts. So my eyes go to the official that's right there. What did you see? And the arm was still down, so I'm going, boy, it was close. Right. And I'm going, it was close. I mean, I thought I saw something that he might call, but if he didn't see it, I guess there's no penalty. And then you hear that the official in center ice has it. And I'm not, and I sit there and go, am I surprised? Not really, because I thought I saw it. Like, you're waiting for something to be called. No question about it. It sucks that it's the guy in center ice who makes that call.
Yep.
It sucks that it didn't look like it appeared to be a call. It's a terrible spot in the game. And granted, I think that you need to be more pissed off with the play than you do the call.
For sure. And that was the result. If people that are listening don't necessarily remember it, that was the result of the face-off win that just kind of drifted between two defensemen, and boom, there's a rush the other way, and that's where it goes.
And let's be real, Max Domi beats 5 guys to get to that. Then
and
you got to get around
you
got to get around the 3 forwards, and then he splits the defense and gets a breakaway.
And Max Domi is very quick. He is faster than a lot of players in the NHL. There's no reason he should out-hustle you that hard, because that's what he did. He didn't just use his speed down the wing. He out-hustled at least 4 Flyers on that play, probably all 5.
And there were guys on Montreal who played well in game 1, but it wasn't their full push. I don't think, like, Max Domi was still on, he's on the 4th line right now, and he was still not really a big presence in game 1.
And he might be a little further behind everybody because he was 7 or 8 days getting to camp for some health concerns, and he might still be catching up to speed, but he certainly looked much better in game 2.
Well, and see, this is the thing. You just woke up a bunch of people. Thomas Tatar hadn't scored since the bubble started.
Max Domi, 3 points yesterday? Tatar had at least 2. I remember 2
goals.
2. Right.
I mean, see, Kotkaniemi didn't surprise me because he had been scoring some big goals against Pittsburgh.
He's just very good.
He's a good player, and it's kind of interesting to see him get to this point now, because this is a guy who was a 3rd overall pick
and a questioned 3rd overall pick.
Didn't look like one in his first year at all,
and a criticized 1st round pick. People had him projected in the 12 range. I remember some had him even further down than that.
So Tatar had just the 2 goals.
Okay.
That's it. But still, I mean, and Domi has 3 assists. Don't think he had a point yet in the entire playoff.
Yep.
You
And that's
you
not
just
what you
woke him
want.
up. You know, it was something interesting because in game one, there was something I noticed from the very beginning, and it wasn't really exposed, to be quite honest, because, it wasn't the Flyers' best game either, like we said. They had, at one point in time, they had the top line against the pairing of Victor Mete and Xavier Ouellet, and it's like that pairing got destroyed against Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Boy,
they got
boy,
shredded.
if there's a matchup you want, it's your top line against them.
That's what you should be exploiting when you have the last change.
And Victor Mete had 2 points.
Yeah.
I mean, you woke up an entire group of players who didn't do anything in the first game and still looked okay.
And you know what? All of those opportunities you had to take advantage of those mismatches are gone because Montreal's got last change for the next 2 games.
I mean, they are to an extent, and here's the thing.
Right, that opportunity where Alain Vigneault can throw his top line out against the third pairing, that no longer exists.
Well, and here's where I'm at with this, and I said something similar on 97.3 yesterday after the game, and I think it's something that I saw echoed a couple times on Twitter as well by media members, not by fans. Because believe me, if I looked at fan Twitter,
you can't. You just can't.
I mean, I will tell you something that I found interesting that I did look at that I do put some stock in. So I don't know why you know what it was? You can't get TSN content sometimes. The videos are blocked out if you're not in Canada.
A lot of them are geo-locked.
And I wanted to see because I think Craig Button put out one or had a post-game quote of some kind, like on his view of it, going, they missed an opportunity, meaning Montreal. They missed an opportunity in game one because that was not the Flyers' best game.
I absolutely
and you lost.
agree with that. By
and
the way. That was your Carey Price steals a game.
Either that or maybe that wasn't Button. I think that might have been the other group. It was like O-Dog and things like that. And their take was, what a missed opportunity.
Yep.
You got to think the Flyers are going to get better from here. So you just took their B- game and let it go to waste. Way to go. Like if you had any shot in the series, that was the chance to take advantage of their poor effort, and you wasted it. That was one side of it. And Button comes out with, they showed they could hang in this series.
Right.
They showed they could hang in a series. And I went over because I wanted to try to watch them. And sometimes your ticket to watching anything is go to the Reddit feeds, right? And I ended up on a Montreal
the what?
Canadiens.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are you saying there's? I don't understand. I've never gotten illegal videos online. I don't understand what you're talking about.
Sometimes it's the only way you can get dual screens working, in the playoffs now because they're locking out everything.
We both grew up in the LimeWire era. We know what's up.
Yeah. But nonetheless, so I go over there and there's a Montreal Canadiens feed, and the feedback on the game was relatively positive after game one. It
should have been.
It was feeling good. It was, we've got a shot in this series.
I think they missed an opportunity, but I think I can easily see where fans think they played really, really well.
And
we look at it going, well, yeah, but the Flyers also played really, really poorly.
Right. And my thought was obviously that wasn't the best performance by the team. We all looked at the second period of game one and went, that's the worst we've seen this team since February.
We watched the first game and said, wow, that was the worst game we've seen. And the team said, oh, you want to bet? Watch Friday. Right. Watch Friday's game, and we'll show you what a bad game looks like.
And here's the thing. We said that was the worst game we've seen, and we said it with surprise given the fact that Boston it was better against Boston, it was better against Washington, it was better against Tampa Bay, and you're going, not so good against Montreal. And we had no idea why. And part of me wanted to buy into they were the third game of the day on ice that had been used regularly.
Both teams played on it.
Well, both teams played on it, and I'm not going to say they didn't, but let's put it this way.
And if anything, Montreal probably benefits from fresh ice more than Philadelphia does, just given play style.
Well, let's put it this way. You sent the video in the chat yesterday, so let's just take the Steve Dangit video where, Montreal had a 2-0 and a guy lost an edge going into the offensive zone.
He sure
did. That's why I'm sitting there saying something about the ice being a condition because I'm saying
it almost definitely was.
And I'm going, the Flyers didn't have as clean of breakouts as we were used to seeing. They definitely couldn't move the puck the way we were used to seeing. But then again, Montreal had a 2-0 and a guy fell down for no reason.
So it goes both ways.
It goes both ways, but I'm sitting there going, they can sit there and say they didn't think the ice was that bad. I don't buy it. I think the ice was bad.
I think the ice was very bad.
Because I think that a guy's going in and possibly scoring on a 2-0 too against you.
And not only was
that was more the reason I thought it.
And in game two, game one, not only was it the third game of the day, one of the ones went into double overtime.
One went into double overtime, and you had a 5 overtime game, which essentially
the
was
day
2.
prior, right?
So you played 2
there's
games
been
the
a
day
lot
before.
of hockey on that ice. Well,
right.
And it's one of those things where I think the Flyers are better suited to a messy game than the Montreal Canadiens are, just because Montreal kind of plays that slick, smooth, free skate, and they're looking for rushes up the ice. And that's not as available. Stretch passes aren't quite as available when the ice is choppy.
Stretch passes aren't quite as available when the ice is choppy, like you're saying. But the other thing is that you need time for a stretch pass to work. You need time for the guy to get open. Right. There is no time with this team. That's obvious. I mean, it's relentless pressure. You've got to be quick. You've got to do this methodically. And I tweeted yesterday at one point in time during the game. I said it was kind of an all-star game approach. You're trying to get cute. And cute doesn't always work in the playoffs. It's rarely cute in the playoffs. It's dirty. It's ugly. But that's how you've got to win. I don't know if that's necessarily where I'm thinking now, because it's not that you've got to get cute with it, but you've got to be quick passing. It's going to look stylish. I mean, you're going to make plays like you made against Washington, those passes. It's just a matter of, Kevin Hayes isn't going to stand there for 3 seconds and outweight Washington and let them all come to him and then lead a guy. That's not how it's going to happen. You're going to be quick to cycle, and it's going to happen in fast motion. It needs to happen the way off of that turnover where Scott Lawton scores a goal in that Washington game. Oh, look, I've got the puck in the corner now. 1 behind the back, 2 in the net.
Right.
That's how it's got to happen. And you got to get Carey Price out of position in the way that you got Braden Holtby out of position on some of those, because where he doesn't have a chance to recover because it's going to be an open net. That's what it's got to be. I mean, you saw the way they scored the 2 goals in game 1. Go to the net and take the eyes. It's got to be.
So
get deflections dirty.
Speaking of going to the net and making things ugly and driving the net and trying to make Carey Price uncomfortable, how many times can he punch somebody in the head?
I don't know what he's got. I don't know what he's got against Derek Grant. I can tell you that. What about him?
Game 1, 3 shots with the glove, not with the blocker, but 3 shots with the glove to the head.
Right. Well,
Friday, game 2, at least 1 clean shot with the blocker, a couple other fakes, couple more. Carey Price has taken some real significant shots at multiple Philadelphia Flyers in this series.
It was really funny because one of the questions I got asked yesterday post-game when I went on the air was not about Carey Price, but it was about Max Domi plowing into Brian Elliott in game 2.
Right.
And the fact that it felt like he launched himself in there. Would the league do anything? And I laughed and I said, well, they could come out and say that, but they'll get hit with a $25,000 fine if they do. So it really is what it is.
Players can't even get a $25,000 fine. Look at the max allowable under the CBA, which is often about $6,000.
It's like $5,000.
Oh, skip your cup of coffee, bud.
Yeah, right.
Oh, my.
No, but I love it because I had to give such a coach speak answer for it and just go, it is what it is. The league's not going to do anything.
They're not. And again, we talked earlier about the ref from center ice making the call, the trailing ref making the play. There was another significant incident later in the game where the ref out at center made the call, correct?
Yeah, there was another one. I mean, there was another call, and ironically enough, I think I put out there too. Those are the 2 that they scored on. The calls that were made by the guy at center ice.
The guy at center ice.
Sure, you can see it. I don't know.
Right. It's just frustrating because it feels a lot like Vegas San Jose, the 5-minute major. Where
a little bit.
Where you're calling the result, right? You didn't see the play. You didn't see Shane Gostisbehere grab the guy or hold the guy. You called it because the guy ended up on his butt.
And sold it well.
And sure he did.
From that angle.
And he made sure that his body was tangled up with Ghost, and he made sure that when they went down, he ended up on the bottom, and he looked like he got hooked or tripped or held or interfered with in some fashion. And he should. And that's his role there, right? Sure. If you're not going to get a clean shot off, you want to try to draw a penalty.
Well, and
also, how do they call that a penalty and not a penalty shot?
Yeah,
because if that's a penalty, then he is free and clear, and you are interfering against a penalty shot. Now, it's not an infraction in my book, watching it, but if you're going to call it, I think you have to call a penalty shot there, don't you?
I'll tell you why it wasn't a penalty shot then, because the guy at center ice can't tell if he gets a quality shot off. The guy who's watching
If you
the play
can't
develop
see the shot, you can't see the penalty in the slot.
The guy who's watching the play develop in front of him, if you put your arm up and say, I saw something, and he didn't really get a shot off, then you're pointing to center ice and you're giving him a shot. He didn't see anything. He didn't call anything.
So he called the result.
Right.
He called Canadian on back.
Sure, it was a results-based. Sure, it was a results-based call. No question about it. There were a couple of them in the game. No
Brad
question about
Brindamore had a point.
Sure, he did. And let's put it this way. And here's why. Because that's not the only game where we've seen it. If you sat down and you watched multiple games, they've had poor games throughout the playoffs.
And it's in Toronto and Edmonton. It's not just. I think there's been more of an issue in Toronto from what I've heard. But I know there's been issues in Edmonton as well. So it's not. I have to go check.
I have to go check because I'm actually genuinely curious about this.
If it is Toronto and Edmonton?
No. I'm curious to see how many, because there were a lot of officials who are older who opted out. And I want to know how many of these guys are doing their first playoff ever. Because there's a lot of.
That would explain why this is being called a lot like the regular season.
Now, granted, yesterday, I can tell you it's not.
Wow.
I can look at the officials' names on that chart and go, you're playoff guys. I know you are.
Well, then there's no excuse.
Right. I mean, there is no excuse, but I'm just wondering throughout, because I don't sit there and go and look at every other game that's been on so far and go, gee, I wonder who the officials are for this game.
If you have to wonder, officials are kind of like a defenseman. If you don't notice them, they're doing their job.
Right. And I mean, and granted, you'll see,
generally speaking,
if you watch the game enough, if you watch enough games throughout the course of a week, other teams, whatever, by a certain point what you expect to be called. Like if you see something that looks very obvious to you, then you expect it to be called.
Every ref will tell you there's an incident in the first 5 minutes and you decide whether it's a penalty or not. And that decision affects the game. You set that precedent for the game of what's acceptable and what's not, and it happens within the first 5 minutes.
Sure, and I am a big believer of the playoffs is a different animal. In the playoffs, you let a little more go than normal. It's the way it goes. You let them play it out, and you certainly don't want to let penalties dictate a game. I'm trying to remember which game it was. I guess it was the Washington game in the round robin that the Flyers played, where you go, how much special teams time was played in this game that you don't get a feel like. One of the things that, and I didn't get the chance to get the question in, but one of the things I wanted to ask either Alain Vigneault or a couple of the players was, like, that was the first game Farabee was in the lineup and Aube Kubel was on his line at that point. I mean, you're going, well, they looked really good together, but gee, how much of a read can you get on two guys when there's when there's not enough 5-on-5
together
time?
Right.
Like that's kind of crazy. Let's go back to the team and
I do want to I do want to clarify real quick that regardless of the poor officiating in Game 2, the Philadelphia Flyers did not deserve to win it. They didn't deserve to be in it. They didn't deserve to score a goal. They didn't score a goal, but they didn't deserve to. They didn't deserve to be in that game. That game was not lost by the officiating.
No, and
the officiating just happens to be supremely annoying.
Right, and let's put it this way. The thing with the officiating is, it's hard to regroup in the first intermission when with 7 seconds left you take a penalty like that.
Bad call that the whole team got fired up about.
Right, and in two ways, because one, it's a call that shouldn't be made, not by the center ice official who's going to base it on the result, but it's also, like I said, it's a play that just shouldn't happen. So now you're going into the locker room after the first period, already down 2-0 after 16 minutes of not getting a shot on goal.
Poor effort.
And so you're frustrated enough as it is. But now the idea is you have to regroup with the mentality of, we're killing a penalty to start the second period.
Yep.
We're killing a penalty.
Yep. And
that should have never happened to begin with, because you shouldn't allow that situation to come up. And then the guy called it from center ice. So you should be able to go,
really tough spot.
Right. So you should be able to go into the locker room and go, 20 minutes in the books, we're down 2-0. It probably is a miracle we're down 2-0. Let's figure out how we fix it. And instead you're trying to kill a penalty, and you know that if you don't kill that penalty, the game's probably over, because you're not scoring 3 on Carey Price if you didn't start it off strong.
No, and I texted to the group chat after intermission, I don't see the team that just played the first 20 minutes. At that point, they're down 2-0. I said, I don't see this team beating Carey Price 3 times today.
And there wasn't any reason to believe it.
There was no pressure. There was no offense. They didn't generate a shot for, I think it was 11-0 before the Flyers generated their first shot. It might have been more than that. It was
I went off of
atrocious.
something, and I went off of something different because I didn't worry about getting a count for what the shot total for Montreal was before the Flyers had one. I remember hearing at one point in time on the broadcast, and this is the only reason I know it, and I don't remember what timestamp it was, but it was something relatively close to midway through. I mean, it was already 2-0, but it was somewhere close to midway through.
That the Flyers still hadn't had a shot.
Shot attempts were 20-3.
Yeah.
At that point, you're going 20-3. It's 10 minutes, 12 minutes into the game. You've got 3 shot attempts, and not even shots on goal.
I do want to mention that Carter Hart gave up 4 goals before he was mercifully pulled.
Right.
How many of those 4 were his fault?
I said none.
Maybe 1. Like, okay. I think there weren't any that were massively his fault.
Right. There definitely weren't one. There wasn't a glaring one.
There were 1 or 2 that you would have liked to have had, and then 2 that he had no chance on at all.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I with some thought to go back and look at some of them again. The first one, I think, the first one's a rebound that comes right out to the slot off a bad angle shot. Hold on. That also, it's 62 seconds into the game.
Yeah.
I don't think you're thinking 62 seconds in, here comes the onslaught right away. I mean,
you're
it happened
a
right
little
away.
Bit of defensive integrity.
The second one, maybe, I mean, let's just say it leaks through, but he doesn't have a stick.
No.
So,
like I said, there's 2 that you would have liked to have seen a save out of, but Carter Hart was not the reason that team lost yesterday either.
Right, and by the way, on that second goal, he doesn't have a stick, and Shane Gostisbehere, who's positioned okay there because he's in front of the net, doesn't take the guy out of the picture who's going to try to take the shot. He drops to his knees like he's going to block a shot.
Robert Hagg probably would have.
I hear you.
In that particular circumstance, I'm not sitting here playing armchair quarterback in 2020, blah, blah, blah.
No, but you're not far off base with it. I think something's happening.
If Robert Hagg is standing in that spot as opposed to Shane Gostisbehere, I think he makes that play. Just
possibly,
even if it's just because he's bigger and has the option.
And it doesn't really matter because that pairing in general was too scrambly altogether. I mean, let's just say I just mentioned them on the second goal. They're going to factor into the next 2 in some capacity. Well, not 2 because Justin Braun factors into the third one. He's screening him.
Right.
And look, I give Tatar credit because that's a good shot.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You don't go posting in without picking your spot and hitting it.
And he's got
but at the same time, right. But let's be real. Braun's in the shooting lane there, so it's hard to pick up. So I think under normal circumstances, a shot from that spot, you go, Hart needs to make a save, but he can't save it if he can't see it.
That's one of those ones where I said I would have liked to have had it. Right, that's not it's not one of those we had no chance on. But at the same time, I don't.
But I also would like Braun. I'd like Braun to get out of his way.
Make a better decision.
Right. And then obviously the fourth one that eventually gets him pulled. I mean, do we want to go into what the hell they were doing on that shift? And like I said when I went on post game on 97.3. I can't even fault the fourth line for being out there for an extended shift because that's the other team's fourth line. That's Montreal's fourth line. That's the matchup you go for.
That's the grind you're working on.
You do need to have that matchup.
Your fourth line should be better than their fourth line. You should want them on the ice at the same time.
Correct. And that actually is the time to put the third pairing out there, but not when, Justin Braun overskates the coverage to begin with, for one, and then Gostisbehere again playing in the right spot because he's in front of the net. You do need to be there, but just get out of your own way. It hits his skate and goes right into the net. I mean,
that's a tough one, and that's one.
It
of
is
those
a tough
ones,
one for him,
and that's one of those ones. We're pretty deep in the second period, or was that early in the third?
No, it was deep in the second.
It was deep in the second. We're deep in the second. You're now down 4-0. This goal is probably the dagger.
Mm-hmm.
It goes in off your goalie's or off your defenseman's foot. Your much maligned defenseman's foot.
Right.
Your goalie had no chance at it. After a couple of bad penalty calls, that's the Murphy's Law goal, right? That's
sure. Whatever
that
can
is
go wrong will go wrong.
Within Friday's game 2. That was the worst it got. That was the rock bottom.
Sure. Well, and you're right about it being the dagger because of the fact that here's the thing. Even at 3-0 for a majority of the second period.
A goal before the end of the period is a whole different animal going into the
because
third.
of the fact that we've seen crazy things happen.
Exactly.
You get it to 2. There's nothing that says a 2-goal third period isn't possible.
We watched this team score 5 goals in the third period on a very good Columbus team in October to storm back and take a win. Like, we've seen this team do incredible things.
We've watched this team score 5 goals against Toronto too.
Toronto's
not a defensive stalwart by any stretch.
I was actually at both of those games, and both of them were a lot of fun.
Right. I mean, But we've seen
this team do insane things, but up to
and we've
that
seen
point,
we've seen a lot of teams do a lot of insane things in the playoffs.
In these
too.
playoffs,
it's just
absolutely.
anything's possible. So yes, if you got it to 2, sure.
Right, exactly. You cut that lead to 2 by the end of the second, and if that doesn't go off a ghost skate, say he stops it with his skate, fires an outlet pass, and they score right there. Right,
Sure.
he blocks the pass, fires it up, and they go score. It's a whole different ball game. You come into the locker room, Alain Vigneault can rally the boys for 20 good minutes. Instead, it goes in the wrong way, 4-0. Carter Hart's out through, again, not no fault of his own, but very little. He played a very good game. Brian Elliott comes in and gets run almost immediately. Thankfully, it wasn't Carter Hart in there, honestly. Sorry, Brian. But if there's somebody I don't want getting run, it's Carter Hart.
Sure. And it was funny because that was brought up when I was on the station yesterday.
Almost immediately after Brian Elliott's in there, by the way.
Right. Like almost. And
within
is it
3
ironic?
or 4 minutes.
And is it ironic? Absolutely it is, because let's put it this way. It's definitely within 3 minutes because there was only about 2.5 left in the period anyway.
Okay. Right. Because there was the talk about, right.
Which says a lot, because almost you wonder, why didn't you even just wait it out until the end of the second period? That's the irony of it. You could have just waited until the end of the second period to make that goalie change. But obviously you wanted to get a message across at 4-0 that says, what's going on
here, boys.
Well,
do you think, is there any question, should Alain Vigneault have made the goalie swap after 3-0?
I don't know.
At that point, again, Carter Hart's led in 3 goals. One of, at least one or probably 2 of which, are definitely not his fault. Didn't really have much of a chance on. At that point, it's still fairly early in the second, right? Because we're talking about that power play goal. Do you make the switch at that point just to try to get a jolt in because you still have a shot because it's only 3-0?
You know what? No, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because at 3-0, you need a perfect game at that point. Probably. Okay. You need a perfect game. So you're going to keep your top guy in net, I think. I also think because it was so early in the second period and it was off of a power play call that you disagreed with.
Right.
You're trying to use it as Let's put it this way. The real turning point of the game for me isn't any goal that Montreal scored. It's the 5-on-3, not too long after it's 3-0, where you got to get one, at least one, maybe 2.
I don't know how you don't call your timeout at the start of that 5-on-3.
I don't think you need to. I honestly don't think you need to. And I understand what you're saying.
Hindsight being 2020, I think you certainly did. But I get what you're saying at the time, though, for sure.
I think you're saying to draw something up. I'm sitting here saying I don't think you need to discuss the magnitude of that situation. You either step up with the 5 best guys you can throw on the ice at that time, or you don't. And they did.
Well, they didn't. Right. I'm even thinking about the first unit started the first power play, right? The one where the second penalty hadn't been called yet.
Yes.
There's almost a thought to just letting them reset, calling the timeout, letting the first unit reset. Not necessarily because you need to draw something up, just to give them a chance to, okay, let's.
Right. This is obviously
take a deep breath.
Spot
it's a big moment. Alain Vigneault doesn't need to say a word. Let them come over, drink their water. Let your on ice leadership handle it, because you think about who's going out there for PP1, right? Couturier, Giroux, your leaders are there.
Right.
That might have been how I handled it. Obviously, Alain Vigneault did not. I don't want to look at it with hindsight, 2020, et cetera, et cetera. But
I wish there was a stat for this, and I don't know if there's a place I can find it, but I don't remember him calling timeout all that often in the season at all.
I don't know. Well,
there were games like the road trip, the Western Conference road trip right after the Oscar news came out, the 6-game road trip that was brutal. Some of those earlier games in October that didn't go so well either. I don't, there were moments where you sat back and you went, "Where's the timeout coming?"
Peter Laviolette would call a timeout here,
right? Where see, your hindsight is call the timeout at that power play at 3-0.
Well, I even suggested calling it after 3-0.
Okay.
After the 3-0 goal, when you pull the goalie, right? If you do it all, I think they serve a similar purpose, right? Calling a timeout and changing the goalie kind of serve a similar purpose at that point in a 3-0 game.
And I mean, if there was a time to do it, I think it would have been at 2-0 where you still don't have a shot on goal and you're going,
That's
hello, are we here to play or are we, just spectating today?
It's really not good that we can't figure out what crappy moment they should have called their timeout for.
No, and you know what?
Hey, should they have when they hit like almost rock bottom, or should they have waited till they got all the way to rock bottom? How bad should it get?
And look, here's what I'll say on this, because one of the things I brought up is that there's something to be said about the analysis from the Montreal end after game one, because like we talked about, some people turned around and said they showed they could hang, and maybe this gave some people some hope on that side. But there was also, like I said, the other side of it was, well, you just saw their B- game and you didn't win. So way to miss an opportunity. And I think that in this team's head, I'm on the Flyers side, I think in this team's head, you start to feel a little invincible when people tell you how good you've been, and even when you didn't bring it, you're not, you won.
They got a little bit of Rocky 3.
You're 5-0 in the bubble, and you played an overtime game that doesn't really count for anything, but you found a way to win that one. And obviously now we're looking at where Pittsburgh is and going, well, gee, that doesn't look like such an accomplishment anymore. Especially,
wow, you only beat them in overtime,
right?
Oof.
Especially an exhibition game that was treated as such. Both goalies played.
For sure. Everyone treated it.
Everybody was warming up there. Then you played Boston, and you had a really solid game against Boston. No question about it. Then you played Washington.
Poor.
Then you played Washington, and I think you had your best game of round robin, I think.
And Washington didn't look good either.
Right.
Missing John Carlson, et cetera.
And then you played Tampa. Tampa loses Victor Hedman. Still pushes in the third period, but all things considered,
you outplayed Tampa.
You outplayed them. You had a 3-1 lead for most of the game.
Definitely.
And you get the empty netter late.
They were the biggest challenge of the
and you won 4-1.
But you still beat them fairly handily. You outplayed them for large chunks of that game.
Sure. And then, so here's the thing with that. Nothing against the fact that you played 3 solid games that beat 3 of the top teams in the conference. No question about it. You deserve to be praised for it. You deserve to get what you got for it, which is, hey, look, now the top seed is theirs. You get all of it. But
you get the perceived weak matchup of Montreal in the first round.
Sure. And then you go out and play Montreal in game 1. And sure, when you don't play your best game, your second period is awful. But at the same time, you still win. And here's the thing. The second period, sure, the second period of game 1 was awful. But the second period of game 1 was awful, and you evened them in score.
Yep.
That's the classic,
you drew net neutral.
How many times, even on the winning streak, how many times did we watch a first period and go, was average.
They came out.
They kind of played survival mode,
But, If they came out of the first period, nothing, or only down 1-0, we were like, all right, we're good. We got.
And usually it wasn't even 1-0. Usually you do.
Usually it was nothing because Carter Hart played fantastic in the first period of all season.
Not great, but okay. And sometimes they came out of those games 1-0. An awful first period, but they got the 1 goal late.
Hey, they got a greasy goal. Kevin Hayes scored a PK goal with 4 minutes left, and here we are.
Right, something.
Yeah.
So I think, John Cooper after the Flyers Tampa game, said something that was really interesting, because he said something about they haven't lost in who knows how long, but also turned around and said for his own team, there's nothing wrong with having a piece of humble pie every once in a while and realizing that it's not going to be perfect.
The Flyers waited a little longer, but they got a big old slice.
Sure. When you feel invincible and you feel like you don't need your best to win, and people are telling you your B- game still beat this team. It's good to be reminded. It's good to be reminded at some point that it's not going to be smooth sailing.
Yep.
Because let's put it this way: didn't we all probably expect better than game 1 in game 2? Sure. And if you expected better in game 2 than game 1, then you expected them to come out with a win and say, okay, they're up 2-0. And I certainly didn't expect the prediction I came up with at the end was, okay, I'll pick Flyers in 5 here.
Yeah.
And the reason I did is because I figured game 1 and 2, you're going to go out and you're going to try to set the tone. And then game 3 or game 4 is going to be the one where you slip up. You get a little ahead of yourself.
Carey Price steals a game. Right. Carey Price
plays out of his mind. And now it gets interesting, because now the goaltending decisions that are going to come, because you got a back-to-back and you have to play it. And here's my answer. I was thinking about this thoroughly before game 2 started, because I always had a feeling it wasn't going to be a sweep. I always had that feeling.
I don't think any of us predicted a sweep.
And my thought was, as long as there's a day off in between games, there's no question who's starting. It's Carter Hart. It's Carter Hart. It's Carter Hart. So it was game 1, Carter Hart. It's game 2, you're going to Carter Hart.
Game 3, you're going to Carter Hart.
And win or lose yesterday, you're going to Carter Hart.
With how he played, absolutely.
There's no doubt about it.
I think he's got a long enough leash that he could have played poorly and would still get the start.
Sure.
But so he also just played well.
So where do you go from here, though? And I knew in my head, the answer was simple. The only way I was playing Brian Elliott in game 4 is if it's 3-0. That's it.
3-0 up. Okay.
Right. If it's 2-1, no matter what direction it's 2-1, it's Carter Hart in game 4.
I think you're correct.
And in game 5, it will be Carter Hart again if it's 2-2 or 3-1 the other direction.
I believe
and your
you're
season's
correct.
On the line.
If
it's Brian Elliott.
Flyers,
if you have a shot to
maybe.
clinch it, right? If you have a shot to clinch it and it's 3-1, you may go to Brian Elliott there. But you also have to weigh something else, because you also have to weigh: do you go with Carter Hart in game 5 if you're up 3-1, knowing you have a chance to clinch, with the possibility that the next time he plays could be next Monday?
Right.
How many days in between do you sit there and you go, well, I'm going to give him the day off anyway because I just want to be sure? Do you worry about it that much that, God forbid it gets to Friday and game 6, that you don't play him in game 5 and, maybe win it and he doesn't play for a whole week?
I don't mind Carter Hart sitting for 5 days.
Okay, that's fair.
It's
a tough call. I don't know where I'd go with that.
It's definitely tough. And how I look at it pretty similar to you, right? Carter Hart's playing on Sunday. Carter Hart's playing game 3. He has to.
Right.
Same with game 4 on Tuesday. I think he's your starter. He's your one. It's got to be him. And like you said, Wednesday, if it's 2-2, Carter Hart's in net. If it's 3-1 Montreal, Carter Hart's in net. If it's 3-1 Flyers, man, I think there's still a good chance that Carter Hart's in net. But I can see a world where Brian Elliott's your starter.
And I think that the answer to that question, especially if it's 3-1 in the series, will be what game 4 looks like.
Right. If game 4 goes into overtime, Brian Elliott get ready.
Well, not only that, but I'm saying it's workload. If game 4 is he's peppered with shots and he helps you almost, it's game 1 all over again and he's the big reason why you're the winner, then I don't know if you go to him, because you need to give him a break. But I don't think.
But I also see him coming off the ice and going, Coach, I want to play tomorrow.
Nothing would surprise me with him.
And if he comes off, if he pitches a gem on Tuesday and makes 38 saves on 40 shots or whatever it takes to beat Montreal on Tuesday, if he comes out and plays a fantastic hockey game, comes off the ice and tells Alain Vigneault, Coach, I want game 5.
Yeah.
Coach is giving him game 5.
Sure. I mean,
they'll put it. And he's earned it.
We'll see what happens. And let's put it this way. Like I said, I think you pulled him from this game now because you're going to get him ready for the long haul, and you're not sugarcoating this series.
He's got 15 more games to win. Losing game 2 to the Canadiens isn't a big deal.
So, but that's kind of the point I'm trying to make from going back to the point earlier, is just, I think they felt invincible. I really do. I think that they thought, and it's funny. I talked about it on here, I think, when we knew that this was the opponent, and I had a story idea for leading up to game 1, which was that they weren't going to take the Montreal Canadiens lightly because of the fact that in January they played a down game. And granted, there's a lot of factors that went into it. Ilya Kovalchuk was still on Montreal and scored 2 goals. No, Alex Lyon was the starting goalie that night because Carter Hart was still out. There was a lot of things about that game.
It was a different game in a lot of ways.
But at the same time, there was enough players who were going to be in this series and going to play that I turn around and I look at Alain Vigneault's response and went, he's not going to sit there and say that they don't deserve to be there or that they are a pushover team. He's going to take it seriously.
As he very well should.
And what you got yesterday was the part of this. No, this is the part of it that goes into 2 sides of it. Because Claude Julien was not on the bench for the reasons that we found out earlier in the week, which is he had heart issues. It's a very serious thing.
And we do wish him supremely well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, because I don't remember if I tweeted these exact words, but this is a coach with a Hall of Fame resume. He's over 600 wins, got the Stanley Cup. He's 13th overall in wins.
And I'm sure that the Montreal Canadiens were playing an energized game yesterday. And we looked at it. We've been looking at this game through the lens of the Flyers.
Sure, and
But
I mean,
when you look at it from the Montreal perspective, right? Your coach is down. Your coach just flew home to heal after getting a stent placed in his heart. And
Sure.
again, we wish Claude Julien the absolute best with his recovery, and we hope it is very speedy and it goes supremely well. But
I'm sure he's feeling better after that game.
I'm sure he is. But your team comes out and scores 65 seconds into the game. Boom, it's on. At that point, Montreal Canadiens are not losing that game in their own minds, in their locker room. Like on their bench, they won that game at that moment, and they just put the pedal to the metal and severely put the Flyers away. They did a great job.
Right. But the reason I want to bring this up is because of the fact that Claude Julien's not on the bench now because of this situation. And like we said, all the best to him, but he's not on the bench and he's not going to be for the rest of the series, presumably.
Yeah, he has left the bubble. So at minimum, he's out the rest of the series.
Right. It sure seems that way anyway.
I imagine he probably won't be around for quite a while.
My belief is that when something like this happens, you're usually on the shelf anyway for about 2 weeks and taking it very easy, so before he even thinks about trying to coach anything again, you're talking at least 2 more weeks.
Oh yeah. And the NHL is going to play it with kid gloves.
Right. And then, and I'm saying 2 weeks before you think about entering the bubble again.
Right.
And then being stuck in your room for 4 or 5 days. Right. Like, I think that's he might be out for a while. If they even
the Montreal Canadiens go to Edmonton, Claude Julien will probably join them at that point.
That's
about
what
they're
assumption.
Looking for. But that's not going to happen.
So here's the thing. So I get asked. So the question I get asked is how much of an impact does that make on the game? And I turned around and I said, look, is it in their heads? Sure it is. But I also sit there and go, Mark Bergevin said when he announced that Julien was out for the rest of the series, he goes, the players are the ones who beat Pittsburgh. So we have a coaching staff on the bench that will that will be motivated, that I trust to do the right things with them. But it's the players who win the games, and the players went out and gave you their best effort. Right. I mean, no question about it. Maybe that's the silver lining, is that I don't think that there's any way you can see better from the Montreal Canadiens. That's the best I think that they can give you.
And if that's the best they can give you, we talked early in the show about the Flyers are probably watching a lot of tape this morning.
But I do
think not only are you watching tape of your worst performance so far since you've been in the bubble,
you got to watch what they're doing.
But if you're watching tape of the best Montreal Canadiens performance since you've been in the bubble, then that's something good to learn from.
And a lot of it, one of the things I tried to pinpoint with this is that a lot of this game is not what they're doing to you; it's what you're doing to yourself. Yep. All they're going to do is take time and space away. And, in case they don't realize this, welcome to playoff hockey. It's intense. It's tight. It's going to be that way. And you expect to be locked in low-scoring duels most of the time. Because has there been a game that's been that lopsided since the bubble started? I mean, in the playoffs anyway? I don't think there has.
Not from our perspective. I think there might have been one otherwise, but
I've struggled to find a game that was even more than a 2-goal margin at the end.
There have been a couple, but there's not
been a handful, but there's not a lot. Most of it is very close. It's very tight, and especially in the first round. I mean, the first round has been a big, healthy dose of get ready for overtime. If not for, let's put it this way. It was.
I do want to bang around the league real quick before we get out of here.
We will, and we will. It was. What was it? It was 1:00 in the morning the night before the game yesterday. So Friday or Thursday night, and you're getting ready for Calgary and Dallas to go to overtime, and there's a goal with 30 seconds left that gives Dallas the win.
Crazy.
But
there's
otherwise,
so much crazy hocky going on.
But otherwise, you were getting ready for another one. Here comes another overtime game. I mean, to that point, there had been 4 of them in 3 days.
Including, and we haven't mentioned it, well, we kind of briefly mentioned it, the historic 5 overtime game 1 between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yep.
That actually forced the postponement of the Boston Bruins Carolina Hurricanes game,
which then went into overtime and had all of us on Wednesday night,
which went into double overtime.
Right.
And the Flyers were sitting there as the 8:00 game going, "Oh,
we were all sitting. Yeah, we were all sitting here on Wednesday with sitting on our hands going.
We were stressing.
Is there a game tonight or not?
I'm gonna let you guys, our listeners, know that the group chat was stressing about whether this game was gonna happen.
Listen, I was stressing about it because I was getting asked questions about it. But I was getting asked questions about it constantly, and it's like, honestly, I don't know. Right. There's no other way I can.
And there's nothing that anybody can do.
There's nothing.
There's nothing that anybody can do except for a Boston Bruin or a Carolina Hurricane scoring a freaking goal.
Well, and here's the thing. all you can do at that point, there was a difference between the 5 overtime game and the double overtime game the next day. And the difference is the 5 overtime game drags on and you're waiting for just one other game to start. That's it. Just one.
Right.
There's one game left on the schedule, and that's the one's waiting to start. And
the
of
double
course,
overtime game's got a full slate behind it.
Well, and only because of the previous
it got pushed
day.
Back.
Right.
It's insane.
So you try to do that, and you're watching, but the thing about when there's 2 other games on the schedule is you can't even think about the 8:00 game. You're just thinking about the one that was originally scheduled for 3 that you go, that's the next one in line. And we don't even know when that starts. So we can't think about the game after that until you know when the next one starts.
Right.
That's the only way to do this. And we waited and we waited and we waited. And obviously we got to a certain point after the first overtime was over that we went, the next one's definitely not starting on time now. So hold out for 4 and hope that 4:00, and that was the thing I kept trying to say was, if it starts by 4, they already know they can do 12, 4, and 8. They know.
Right.
They need that 4-hour window. If it goes any later than that, I think you're in trouble.
Get a little hairy.
And to the credit of the league, what time did that game end? 2:50?
2:50.
They got that next game started by 5 after 4.
Yeah, it was fantastic. The NHL did. The
NHL
has done a fantastic job with their turnarounds the whole time.
Sure.
Real quick, Game 3. Flyers Canadiens. Who you got? Sunday, 8 p.m.
Look, I'm going to take the Flyers in that one, and I'll tell you why. Either you've got something for this, if you don't have a response to this, knowing what's ahead in the playoffs, then you're not going to, then take all that contender talk out and throw it out the window. One
more flat performance, and the Flyers go from legitimate league-wide Stanley Cup contenders.
Sure, and I also say it because, and the one thing one of the things I haven't mentioned at all while we've done the show, is Alain Vigneault's response to the game in front of the media, and there's 2 angles to it.
Okay.
And one is a very classic Alain Vigneault tactic that is his veteran coaching gamesmanship that sets you up, that takes the story off of certain, I appreciate the very beginning of his press conference. You appreciate it because he didn't sugarcoat anything. He comes out, he goes, if I'm just looking at today, we got our butts kicked in every facet of the game. We got our butts kicked. And he said it several times, and that's the way it needs to be done. I loved what he said to the next question because he said something about, Montreal's will to play the right way and do the right things was much higher than the Flyers in Game 2, which is correct. Yeah. But then goes on and says something about you certainly don't expect to come out as poorly as they did, and you have to turn the page and be ready because we know they are going to be ready. They are. Like he didn't even sit there and say something like they're going to be. He just flat out said they're ready.
They're playing.
And I think there's no doubt they're ready, so we need to be ready.
I think one thing that the Flyers learned through these first 2 games is that the round robin games are not the same animal.
Sure.
And we're really seeing that playoff hustle out of the Canadiens, and we're not seeing it out of the Flyers for a large chunk of these games.
So let me get into the gamesmanship play, because now at this point in time so far, you've heard 2 really damning statements by your head coach. One, that you got your butts kicked, which anybody who watched the game saw. Right. And the other one being, we need to be ready because they are. Right. And, okay. All good
That's
things
implying
so far.
That you're
and,
all very
good things
not.
So far. Right. So, and all good things so far, and all very true statements, and all things that say we need to get up in time for the next game because this isn't going to win the series, and we need to do this. So here's the gamesmanship. This is unprompted because it was I don't remember exactly what the question is. I'm going to try to pull it up really quick because it's do you use something about this as a teachable moment? And so that, I guess it was the slow start. It has something to do with it. I don't know. But whatever the context of the question was, Alain Vigneault turns this into this answer unprompted. Playoff hockey is about winning 4 games. Right now the series is tied 1-1. We're going to need to be a lot better. I saw toward the end of the game there where Kurt Muller got a 5-0 lead and put his number 1 power play on the ice. We've embarrassed ourselves enough. I don't think we needed to get embarrassed anymore. I'm going to make sure our team is aware of that ahead of the next game. The tactic there is taking the focus off of what you did wrong and saying, look at what they did at the end of the game. Look at what he did to try to run up the score in a playoff game. Kirk Muller's answer, by the way, is fine too. Because Kirk Muller's answer is our power play hasn't been really good, which is true up until this series, because so far they got 3 power play goals in 2 games.
Pretty great.
well, and even so, they were 2 for 5 on the power play yesterday. Montreal was, and you go, all right, you had 5 power plays. There were 3 of them.
And they had to score on the crappy calls, huh?
Sure. Well, no, that's
I know.
typical.
No,
I know. To quote Peter Laviolette, that's probably Montreal typical. But nonetheless, here's the deal. You take that statement, and so Kirk Muller's right when he says this. We don't have a lot of practice time, so we want to work on. So we want to try to work on everything to be as good as we can for the series. And you're right. In a regular season, you go back and you work on something, and you go, it's already 5-0. We've won this game, and now they've given us another power play. The Flyers did something like this earlier in the year. It was against Florida. And Robert Hagg scored a power play goal because you put guys who never see the ice on a power play out there.
Game 3 starter, Robert Hagg?
Probably. But you put guys like that on the ice because you aren't going to try to run up the score. They scored anyway, but you weren't trying. You're sitting here going, I'm going to step
giving
back
some guys some experience who don't necessarily have a ton of power play time.
Right. And granted, the reason being is because if the power play wasn't good to that point in that particular game, and you're up 5-2 anyway with a minute left, then you're going to sit there and go, well, at practice the next day or 2 days from now or whenever it is, we'll run power play and we'll fix it, and work on it. In a playoff series,
where you don't have practice time.
Well, no, game 3 is tomorrow. Game 3 is Sunday. You got it, and you're playing on Friday afternoon in game 2. It doesn't matter that you've won the game already and the series is tied 1-1. You've got to work ahead you have to look ahead to the next game already.
And I don't mind them doing it, because if the situation were reversed and with how poor the Flyers' power play has been, to throw them out there. Let's see what they can do. I get where Montreal is coming from doing it. I get where Alain Vigneault is coming from calling it out.
There's just something funny about it, like the way that this is.
Yeah. And I think AV might be searching for a little bit of bulletin board material and try to get the boys going a little bit. And hey, if that's what it takes, if that's what this is, and I don't know if it is, but if that's what this is and it works, cool. I think there needs to be a little more physicality. There needs to be a little stand-up-ish. We talked about Carey Price taking some free shots, and we talked about Brian Elliott getting run, and there was really no pushback from the Flyers in either scenario.
And let's just wait. I'm putting the quote piece out Saturday morning once we're done recording this, and I left out a lot of stuff that was said to an extent because I thought, let's just say, I don't want to dominate an article with nothing but quotes either. Right. So I'm sitting here going, what Alain Vigneault said overpowers a lot of what everybody else said, and that's what's going to be the heart of the matter here.
Definitely.
At the same time, Matt Niskanen admitted it, Claude Giroux admitted it, Kevin Hayes admitted it. They all kind of in their own way, without sitting there saying we didn't take this seriously, kind of sat there and said, we didn't take this as seriously as we should have. And I think that now that's why I think they're going to come out and look so much better in game. Now. Right. Like all of a sudden, I think they're going to come out and look so much better in game 3 because of the fact that you didn't just, one of the things I tweeted during that first period was there is no Carey Price factor when you don't shoot.
Right.
Carey when Price you don't have shots, then Carey Price isn't a factor, and you were already down 2-0 before you even had a chance to let him try to steal the game. So guess what? He didn't steal game 2. And you could look at a game, maybe you thought maybe we'll lose a game in the series because he steals one. You lose 2-0, and it's the game 4 against Pittsburgh all over again. Late goal, empty netter. You don't feel bad about the way you played. If that happens, you look at the goalie and you go, wow, what an effort, And you especially don't feel bad about the loss if you take 35 shots in a game and he makes all 35 saves.
Right.
You don't finish a game with 30, most of which were not quality anyway. And or not to say not quality, most of which were, when it was after 3-0 or 4-0 or what, when it didn't matter anymore.
There is
no positive from
shots.
There's no positives from. Hey, maybe you took 10 shots in the third period. I don't know what it was. I'm not even going back to look. I don't care. I know it was 6 in the first. I know it was 6 in the first period. That's all I know. And I don't, that's all I'm saying. It's like you don't get there's no positive from that.
I know.
You didn't take enough shots.
Now a question for you.
Sure.
Alain Vigneault hands you the lineup chart tomorrow and says, you can fill this out however you'd like. What changes do you make?
Well, I mean, and I don't know if we've brought it up specifically yet, but I'd like to know if I have one Travis Konechny to my availability.
And he left the game late in the third period, and after blocking a shot, I believe. Correct.
Given what we've talked about over the last several weeks, since we've started going back to the weekly format and having the ability to talk about this,
we're back.
If Alain Vigneault handed me the lineup card, then I assume I'm privy to more information than I am now. Because right now, all the information I am allowed to have is that he's probably not available.
You assume at that point you would have access to some internal data.
Well, right, like that a guy's unfit to play.
Let's say Konechny's available to play. Let's say you got him. What lineup changes are you making from game 2 to game 3 to get a win here? Because game 3 is big here, right? We're talking about.
I mean, I was thinking radical. To be honest, I was really thinking radical. Not on the back end, honestly.
Okay. I was gonna say Provorov, Sanheim top pairing radical, or what do you think?
No, I'm still thinking Provorov, because Provorov and Niskanen were way better in this game than they were in the first game.
I agree, but I wouldn't mind seeing Provorov, Sanheim again.
No, but that's a lot
of fun.
But like the second period of game 1, the defenseman who I thought was the worst was Niskanen. A lot of turnovers.
He had a
lot of turnovers. He had a
steady
bad game.
Eddie was not very steady.
Right, exactly. Sanheim Myers was fine. I think they only got scored on yesterday on the power play anyway. Right. There was one. I think there was one other goal, but
I think Travis Sanheim played a solid game as far as anybody.
Sure, and I think
having a solid game goes.
And I think Ivan Provorov was still your most steady defenseman because let's just say, at the end of the day, they didn't get scored on.
Nobody had a good game yesterday.
Right, but there was a couple guys who you said didn't have the poorest game either.
There are a couple of guys who can escape the wrath today.
Kind of.
A little bit.
So the only change I'm making defensively, and it's going to not sound crazy, but somebody's going to have to stay in from that third pairing. I think it's Justin Braun because I think it's Justin Braun for one reason. It's one reason. Size.
Okay.
I can't leave Shane Gostisbehere in that lineup because mobility is not where it's at in this series. I think
we thought it was going to be mobility.
And
then Shea Weber remembered that it's the playoffs.
And you know what? I think
he can get away with murder.
Well, and I think
he's gotten away with murder.
And I think there's something to Justin Braun's game when he doesn't have to keep in the back of his mind, when's Ghost going to jump into the play? When am I going to be the only one left?
When do I have to cycle back?
When you put him next to Robert Haig, I think because both of them know the responsibility of that pairing.
It's a little more steady.
It's much more steady because they both play the same game.
Your third pairing is there to kill time while your top 4 rests.
So that's
the goal of your third pairing is literally just don't give up a goal.
So I've already spelled out, because Carter Hart's going to start game 3, no question in my mind, and I really think that that's the only change you see defensively is Robert Haig in, Shane Gostisbehere out, and go back to the formula that worked before.
You said radical, so hit me. You got to have something crazy up your sleeve for up front.
If Konechny's available, I think I put him on the top line to try to get him going. Not that Sean Couturier and Giroux have been great. But I try to do it for everybody.
I think Konechny with those
think a change of scenery for everybody is a good thing there.
And they have some familiarity. They've played together before. I think it's time to get that band back together.
Now, all right. So hear me out on this one because I'm going to tell you what I would do, and I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen.
Okay.
And what I think is going to happen is not going to please as many people as what I think should happen. So my second line would be
as is typical. Right?
So my second line, if I'm making it, would be Kevin Hayes centering Joel Farabee and Jake Voracek.
I can't find a fault with that. That sounds great.
I think
that sounds like a fantastic second line.
I think it's going to be Kevin Hayes and Jake Voracek, with James Van Riemsdyk. Okay. The one thing, because here's the thing I think will happen that I would also do. I'd put Scott Lawton back at third center.
Okay, I agree.
I think you need some structure here.
6.
I think you need him back there. Not that the second line isn't giving you what you got in the round robin, and I think as long as they were doing that, you had a reason to keep Lawton in the top 6. Now I think you need him out of there, and I don't think that Joel Farabee is the answer on left wing there necessarily because he's young and he's got the ability. Like he's been beat up a little bit in this series, no question about it.
Yeah, he's been battered around a little bit for sure.
But I also think that there's going to be something to be playing with those other two guys and keeping him on the left side. Now, so if Scott Lawton's on your
third
third line now, then I think, Nick Aubé-Kubel is obviously on that line in some capacity. And I think that Tyler Pitlick would probably fit in on that line too. And then your fourth line now is going to be
What's Michael
Derek
Raffl's
Grant.
status?
I think he's in next game.
You think he's in?
I don't think – let's put it this way. What's his status? Given what I'm allowed to find out from anybody in this situation.
Well, he didn't take warm-ups game one. He took
warm-ups
warm-ups, but he didn't play game two.
No, but
kind of seems like he's progressing.
I don't think he played in game two for one reason, and it's because when you win games, you don't change the lineup. And I think that now you'll see him in. You want to know what his status is? He was on the ice for warm-ups. He can play.
Yep.
Done deal. So if he can play, I'm going to see him. I see him in game three, no question. And I'm going
to go real radical here. You ready for mine?
Sure, go ahead.
Nate Thompson out.
Well, that by the way, that's who was out for me. Because I put Grant dropped, Raffl was on there, and who else am I missing at this point?
I still like Lawton to third center. I have Grant as my fourth center. Nate Thompson out. Morgan Frost on his wing. I know
it's radical.
And I know. And we talked about Joel Farabee kind of getting beat up, and Morgan Frost is a smaller version of that. But I think there's something to be said for speed, and this team doesn't have a burn threat in the same way that Montreal does with Kotkaniemi and Domi, and even Danault's got wheels. I think Morgan Frost gives you a little bit of mobility in your forward core and in your bottom six, and there's been some of that, but I think Morgan Frost provides some finishing ability, right? Because we saw Nate Thompson hit that tap in about 4 feet wide. And,
by the way, I left you hanging on one of those lines then, because I said, okay, so Derek Grant goes down.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to figure out who else I had left on the list. And basically what I ended up doing is, so I said Michael Raffl was one because I subbed him in. But I still had an opening.
Okay.
Not an opening, but
right.
I intend to take Nate Thompson out of the lineup if I'm making the lineup. So I think that Raffl would play right wing on the fourth line. And Connor Bunneman would come back in.
Oh, man, I'm not a fan of that one. I just because I'm personally not the world's biggest Connor Bunneman fan, but I
think they've played fine with him, and I think he's a little bit motivated. He's created a little bit more. I just can't see a way that you leave Thompson in. That's more of where that's coming from.
Totally. The thing for me is we've kind of skirted around the topic, and no one's just come out and really criticized. The top six production has been poor.
It's been very poor, and I think that you get some. And
I think it's time to put a bona fide scorer in the bottom six, like Morgan Frost can be. I think it's time to put somebody with some finishing ability, some real Morgan Frost is not currently a star, but I think Morgan Frost has NHL star power.
Sure.
And I think there needs to be some of that in the bottom six, because right now we have a bottom six that's very competent, can do some things, but generally is just kind of good. There's nothing special about it. And putting Morgan Frost in can be a special thing in your bottom six, and they don't currently have that.
Well, and here's where I'm at with this. I'm hoping that if you pull Scott Lawton off of 2 and drop him to 3, you bring some talent into the bottom six.
Okay.
I think that, and I think the same thing could happen to Derek Grant to an extent. Derek Grant had 15 goals in the regular season, collectively between the teams he played for.
Many of which for Anaheim.
Right, but you match him up.
Who didn't score any goals.
Well, right. But you match him up on the fourth line, maybe there's something to that too. I'm not trying to say he's going to be a scorer. And
sure.
And I wonder if Michael Raffl brings you some of that too. If you play him on the fourth. No, if you play him on the fourth. The only
you look at Morgan Frost and you look at Michael Raffl, who's got more star power? Who's got more hockey talent?
Well, who's got more star power potential? It's for Morgan Frost.
Right. Who's got more raw talent?
The only reason I dispute what you're going to try to do with that is
the size matchup.
No, is that he hasn't played.
Oh, okay. That's fair. He hasn't played at all. He didn't even play. He didn't play in the round robin. He didn't play in the Pittsburgh game.
This is the decision you make when you want to see him, and it's the final game of the round robin, and you probably don't care whether or not you come out with the 1 or the 2.
Right.
But I want to see him. and you get him a chance to go on the ice, play in a game, and if he looks okay, you feel comfortable using him in a
him
playoff
as an
series.
option. You can pull him off the bench.
I don't know that I can look at anybody who hasn't played in a playoff series yet, and unless an injury is the reason he's coming in, then I have to pick somebody who's played.
And
so
you know
Raffl
what?
comes in, and like honestly, I think Nate Thompson's in the lineup in Game 3 if Konechny doesn't go.
I agree. And you know what? I think you're right, given the fact that Morgan Frost is 21 or whatever he is,
Right.
and he's got 25 NHL games in his career. If it was a guy like Michael Raffl sitting in Morgan Frost's spot, I'd feel a little bit more comfortable about calling him out of the bullpen cold. But Morgan Frost just doesn't have the experience.
Well,
and I think you're right. That's fair.
And let's be real. You're currently working with two centermen who are on expiring contracts. You know, if we're having this conversation going into next season, I think there's a spot for him. I think at some point in time you're gonna take the training wheels off of him, and you're gonna say he's closer to going.
It's time to go play and figure it out. Yep.
But I don't think it's not going to happen in Game 3 of a playoff series. It's tied. You know, that's the problem.
No,
in Game 3 of a playoff series, it's tied. When you know you need the next game, I don't think that there's going to be I think there's going to be shuffling, but I don't see a lot of changes because of the fact that I don't think you want to take anybody who played in that game.
There's so much to be said for the game play experience so far.
And not just that, but I think when you got it handed to you, you want those guys to go back out the next game and be better.
For sure.
And maybe that means moving some guys around, and that's how you try to wake them up. I mean, let's put it this way. I don't like the idea of trying to make wholesale changes here, but it could very well happen.
It could.
Because you need to.
And we will see if it happens tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Sure.
Before we get out of here, I did want to hit on the rest of the league.
Well, and I had a point that I wanted to hit on that involves the rest of the league because the thing about the Flyers is this too, and I said it's what John Cooper said was it's good to have a little bit of humble pie, and the Flyers got a real healthy dose of it, no question about it. When I look at the rest of the round robin teams from the Eastern Conference side, and I kind of sit there and go, how are they doing right now too? The Flyers just got it handed to them in Game 2, and they're all that can be said for a 5-0 loss in Game 2. As bad as the game is, it's one game. It's 1-1
of what Montreal needs to win.
Well, right, and it's 1-1, and you've got 3 more games to go, guaranteed, right? Yep. Nobody takes that away. You've got to play 3 more games at least, and it's a series that's now down to 5 games. Win 3 out of 5, you're on to the next round. And ask the other teams how they're feeling, because they're all in the same situation, with the exception of Washington.
Right, that's the theme from around the league, right? So we have all these high-ranked teams who have quote-unquote home ice. And Flyers Canadiens is 1-1. Lightning Blue Jackets is 1-1. Bruins Hurricanes is 1-1. 3 of your 4 matchups in the East.
Well, and let's just start with those before we even because we'll touch briefly on the Western Conference.
And then
go into detail, but
out west, I'll hit it real quick here because it really doesn't. Colorado's up 2-0. Vegas is up 2-0. Vancouver's upsetting St. Louis. They're up 2-0. We might be able to talk about that series after you're done your thing here.
Yeah.
And then Calgary and Dallas have actually played 3 games, and Calgary's up 2-1 in that one.
Okay, so
back to the East here.
No, so here's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So every single series on the East side right now, that your 1, 2, 3, and 4 teams that were reseeded after everything. So your number 1 went out and played a subpar game and still won 2-1, and then got crushed 5-0. It's a 1-1. No, it's a 1-1 series. Your number 2 team had to go 5 overtimes against a 9 seed to win Game 1, and then lost Game 2 pretty convincingly. No, pretty convincingly, because Columbus looked pretty darn good in that game.
They sure did. Boston looked
and Columbus, by the way, is a team that I look at when I think about the Flyers right now. That's the response right there.
I'm sorry, Boston. You said Carolina. I'm sorry, you said Boston and Columbus, didn't you?
No. I'm
sorry.
I'm saying Columbus, and I look at the Flyers. That's the response.
I'm sorry.
Because how many times has Columbus had their backs to the wall in different situations? You lose, you win a game after being down 3-0, and you're riding high, and you got to admit, if you were down 3-0, it wasn't the best game then at the start, but you found a way to win. Then you're leading 3-0, and you blow it as bad as you can blow it. Oh, by the way,
bad as you can blow it.
So the 3-0 comeback that they win, comes after a game where your coach came out and the only answer he has for you is Toronto was great and we sucked. Yeah. What did Alain Vigneault say after a Game 2? without
basically that.
Basically,
Montreal was great. We sucked.
Right. So he says we got our butts kicked.
All right.
So you prepare for the response. Now, granted, the response by Columbus in that game was not great to start.
No.
But you finish it off. You make your comeback and you win. Then you lose in the worst way you can possibly lose a game. You're up 3-0 with 4.5 minutes left, and you find a way to lose the game.
It away.
Right. So how do you respond to that? 3-0 or with 3-0 shutout win?
Yeah.
In Game 5?
Yeah.
To put that series away and move on. Now you come out and you lose Game 1 of the next series in 5 overtimes, which is debilitating. That can kill a team in a series. That could have been the series right there. Tampa found a way to win that game.
I said as much in the group chat. I said it's hard. It's hard to lose a 5 overtime game and win that series. The only saving grace they had was that it was Game 1. If that's Game 4 or 5, you're done.
Sure, and maybe in Game 1 it lingers for a game or two, but that could still lead to 2-0 Tampa or 3-0 Tampa, and at the worst, you're at best you're down 2-1 in the series.
And that's the way I can see it.
And they bounced right back and looked good in the process.
If Alain Vigneault doesn't win the Jack Adams, John Tortorella
will.
Because remember, and I'll say the line that everyone said all year when talking about Columbus, don't forget they lost Duchesne, Bobrovsky, and Panarin.
And are still winning games.
And are still stellar.
Sure. And let's put it this way. By the way, I kind of said from the beginning when we started to talk Jack Adams that I thought Tortorella was the favorite to begin with. I love the job Alain Vigneault's done. I love his style, and I love the way he is with media members. Believe me.
When the season paused and when the vote was taken, it's John Tortorella. It should be John Tortorella.
That's who I think it should be.
I think if you included the first 2 weeks of the bubble, I think Alain Vigneault might have gotten it. But no, based on when the vote happened, I think John Tortorella is probably going to win it.
Okay. Now let's go to the other 2 series, because that's Columbus and Tampa. And so that's Tampa, who needed 5 overtimes to win Game 1 and now has to respond to Game 2. Yep. And had a very, maybe not on the scoreboard, but it's a similar game to the way the Flyers were in the sense that, Columbus really had control of that game for most of it.
For sure.
All right, let's go to the other one. So Boston, Carolina.
That's a great series.
In addition to being an excellent series, Game 1 goes double overtime. Carolina, clearly here to play, right? But Boston gets the win. Can't deny them that. Yep. And probably not their best game. And now in Game 2,
I think that was an experience win there. That's a team with a lot of playoff mileage on it, digging deep and beating a team with Justin Williams and a bunch of 22-year-olds.
Well, and Justin Williams didn't play in Game 1.
Okay. Well, then it was them beating a bunch of 22-year-olds.
Well, right. And what was the one area that we constantly talk about when it comes to Carolina? Goaltending. Peter Mrazek is the guy that you strap, everything to and say, carry us on your shoulders when we need you. And he overplayed the goal in overtime badly.
But he played pretty fantastic leading up to that.
Oh, yeah, he had been good. I'm not saying he hadn't.
Right. At a certain point, Carolina isn't expecting Peter Mrazek to hold up forever. They're just expecting him to hold up long enough that they can lock it down.
Some breaking news here.
Yeah, go for it.
Tuukka Rask opted out.
Whoa. Okay, so this podcast is going to go right up after we're done. We might have Mike clip this and put it at the front of the show. Tuukka Rask has opted out. I assume you mean left the bubble, going home.
2 minutes ago, and so now we're going to have to talk about this. So we
absolutely have to talk about that.
No, so here's because I know why, or we have a reason, not sort of a reason why, but
okay.
All right, so it's 10:20 in the morning is when this was just posted. He just issued a statement. I want to be with my teammates competing, but at this moment, there are things more important than hockey in my life, and that is being with my family. I want to thank the Bruins and my teammates for their support and wish them success. So let's go kind of and to preface that statement. He came out after Game 2 and said something along the lines of, it still feels like exhibition out there. And I don't think that was what his intent to say was. I think his intent was to sit there and say, this is really different. It doesn't feel like playoff hockey in the traditional sense.
Yeah,
and
he actually got criticized pretty heavily for criticizing the environment, saying it didn't feel like the playoffs with no fans. I think a lot got lost in translation there.
Well, and I think the reason it did is because mentally you either have to be there for this thing or you don't, and don't get me wrong, a lot of players are sacrificing certain things in this situation. You've got how many players on the Flyers alone have we talked about where we just, Brian Elliott and Claude Giroux are missing their kids' first birthdays,
Right.
And
Sean Couturier went into the bubble 3 days after the birth
his
of his
daughter was
child.
born.
Yeah.
James Van Riemsdyk, his wife had a baby just a month or two before everything went back like this. So you're giving up a lot. And, Claude Giroux, like, here's a good example. They talked about this on the broadcast yesterday even. His wife posts something that says something about like day 31 or day 34
without dad or whatever.
Without dad. Yeah. And they're going, that's not how long they've been in Toronto. They're talking before that. He left to go to New Jersey to train. Right. And that was the moment that was the moment when he left and wasn't coming back until this is over.
Yep. They didn't come to South Jersey with him. I knew that.
So he's been out he's been away from home for more than a month.
Yep. And when your child is a year old.
And it's a sacrifice.
That's tough.
And if your mind is not in it, like, I want to go win. Like, see, that's the thing. Like, and that's where the mentality has to come back for game 3 for the Flyers is.
This is who we're playing for.
No, but it can be a quick stay here. You can be done by next Wednesday if you're not with
If you want to see your family, you can see your family in about a week if you keep playing the way you played in game 2.
Right, exactly. But see, and here's the thing. The impression you got from round robin was, we don't want to end this soon.
Right.
We
want to go to Edmonton. We want to be gone forever or a while here.
By the way, because you just shared it in our group chat. By the way, Mike made a great point just now. They literally play in less than 2 hours from now. They have a 12 o'clock game.
I assume the team
knew before this. Yes,
knew a while ago here, right?
But what I'm saying, like, that's a fair point though.
Well, let's talk about how this affects the series here.
Sure, we will talk about this. So kind of back to the comments that he made though. So if you're not with it mentally, and a lot of people said this, if you don't have the mentality like it's an exhibition game, then just opt out, and or not even opt out. Like, he could have sat there and said, okay, I'll sit there and like I don't want to be the starter.
Ride the bench for a couple.
You've got Yaroslav Halak. If you've got Yaroslav Halak, who is a good enough goalie to be a starting goaltender, no question about it.
And I'll take a mentally slightly checked. Right, and I'll take a mentally slightly checked out Tuukka Rask as a backup over whoever their third backup is. Who's their third goalie? Does anybody know? Is it
Dan Vlader? I think.
Is it Mike McKenna?
No, it's not Mike McKenna. Mike McKenna is doing. Yeah.
Is it David Ayers?
There's one
to play against Carolina. Oh, that would be a story.
Oh, that would be a story.
But either way, what do you think this does to the series? Now, I think we both had Boston going through. Does this change that? Does Carolina take this? No, I had Carolina going through. So from a prediction standpoint, I love this.
I did post my predictions on Twitter, right?
Oh, I believe so. I didn't see them
because I wrote them down on somewhere else, but we didn't talk about them on the show.
No, we didn't. The playoff schedule was weird. I already
had Carolina in 6.
Okay. Well, this certainly
and I feel really good about it right about now.
Yeah, I wonder. The Vegas line is probably shifting as we speak.
Now I don't have the answer to this, but it's a question that's in my mind right now that I'm curious about. Remember back before all this started, there was an opt-out period. And we were told anybody can opt out if they want to without penalty.
I remember hearing players can opt out at any time without penalty. I think that date was more of a courtesy date of like, hey, we'd really appreciate it if you could let us know so we can plan without you.
Let me say this then. If that's what it is, then I don't remember hearing it.
Because I remember the PA making a big deal out of players being able to opt out at any time with no penalty.
Okay, and then if that's the case, then sure. And here's the thing too: there's got to be something to be said to the flexibility that there's been a lot of people who have left this bubble.
Certainly,
there's got to be something to be said about the flexibility of this guy went home for this. How many can we think of off the top of my head? For one, Claude Julien. Claude Julien left. He's not coming back, obviously, but still left the bubble. Jake Muzzin left the bubble with Toronto at one point in time. Lars Eller left to go home for his child.
I believe Jake Muzzin's bubble was preserved for what it's worth. Anyway, but yeah, several people worked out. But. I think, Lars Eller left. Multiple people have left, and it's nice to know that they have a re-entering protocol in place. We've heard about you have to pass 4 tests on 4 consecutive days to successfully rejoin the bubble. So that bodes well as we kind of move further. If teams need to dig a little deeper in the resource pools, as maybe we get to the point where families can come in. It's nice to know that they have protocols in place.
Right.
But this is by far the biggest opt-out in terms of impact on the ice.
Sure. And let's put this way.
There wasn't anybody. The Boston Bruins, the President's Trophy winning team, just had their starting goalie opt out after game 2.
And there wasn't any, what did we have beforehand? 6 players total who I think opted out in
Something
that period.
Like that. I know Mike Green was one of them.
But most of it wasn't significant. Like,
they were bit part. Guys,
Travis Hamonic for Calgary and Roman Polak was with Dallas, I think. And it's like, they weren't guys that you thought that shakes up whatever series they're in. First of all, Calgary obviously got a gift with the way that the series against Winnipeg shaped up because they lost so many key players to injury.
Right.
That, they played half the series without Scheifele and Laine. So they win. But now they're kind of showing – and I had this. I think I had Calgary in 6 in this Dallas series because I didn't love what Dallas was doing. I thought, Boston to me – there's something about Boston in the round robin that – when you play a certain way, and Tuukka Rask's answer at the end of the third round robin game, and it was fine then, was, well, now that's over. At least now the real games can begin. Fair enough, because it was round robin. You're playing playoff games under regular season rules.
It was very strange.
And by
those might go down as the strangest games in NHL history, and they're gone forever from a score perspective because they don't count anywhere. But anyway.
So that's understood. But I always felt that any team that plays in a series like that, or goes into a playoff series after playing 3 games like that, how do you flip the switch? Like, we can sit there and say the Flyers didn't look good in game 2 against Montreal, but we're sitting there going, well, we've seen better.
Right.
This isn't, hey, there's a struggle to flip the switch to playoff intensity. We've seen better, unless it's just the playoff series dynamic. Hey, we weren't in a playoff series before, so the pressure wasn't on. So now that the pressure's on, we haven't looked our best. Maybe that's what it is. But I knew that Boston, even as a President's Trophy team, even with, let's put it this way, even with, because Rask is up for the Vezina this year. So with a Vezina Trophy nominee, with a guy who could have been in the Hart running, probably should have been.
Okay.
It was close.
No,
so you got that. A guy who's been nominated for the Selke for the 9th year in a row.
I swear, if Frank J. Selke ever gets his name off that trophy, they're just going to call it the Bergeron.
Patrice Bergeron Trophy. Yeah,
Oy
I know.
Vey.
But so all of that being said, here's a team, and I'm going, it's going to be hard to flip the switch, though. Like, you can't just flip the switch to where you were in the regular season. What were they on when the pause happened? And they won 8 or 9 in a row or something like that. They were really hot, too.
I think they were 8-1-1 in their last 10, yeah. Is there any possibility that Tuukka Rask's attitude was a little stink bomb in the dressing room and maybe removing him? Not obviously you're losing on ice. But again, we've talked about how competent Yaroslav Halak is. We've seen him take teams on playoff runs. 2010 Canadiens.
They've played, Boston, they've played close enough games already that I don't think he was the problem.
Okay.
With their performance.
But I'm just curious if things were just a little tiny bit off, right? And that might have been why, their performance looks so poor in the round robin.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
either way,
like we said, there's definitely hasn't been a name who's opted out yet that's been as big as this.
Right, and this is the big one, and this is the first big test. I'm curious to see how the hockey world receives this. I am supremely thankful that Don Cherry is not on Saturday nights anymore.
And here's
that would have been ugly.
Yeah, sure.
That would have been real ugly.
So here's the thinking behind it. So he definitely is concerned about family, and it's respectable for sure. The thinking is this: when you go away to do something for a while, and maybe it's more easily understood for media members who go and cover, nationally, who have to go to 2 cities that they don't call home for the Stanley Cup final,
right.
Or whatever. And you spend 2 weeks away, and those 2 weeks you're away from your family for the entire time because you just go from blank city A to city B. And it's back and forth until it's finally over. And then that's when you get to go home and it's over. Right?
Right.
There's something to be said that as we're now into what? This is the 3rd or 4th week of bubble life.
We're deep into it at this point.
They've been there since the end of July. And if your heart's just not in it, then your heart's just not in it.
It's starting to get to homesick time for sure.
Right. And I mean,
it's the end of the, we heard Elaine Vigneault talk early on about it's just going to be a long road trip.
Right.
You've kind of reached your limit of this is how long your longest road trip is.
Right.
It's time to get home into your family if that's how you're looking at it.
Right. And I think that most of the player, like, I don't think it's the last one you'll see like this potentially, but I also don't think it's something that's gonna be common because I think that the farther you get, the more motivated you're gonna be because your eyes are on the prize.
The harder it is to get out. Right.
Well, because your eyes are on the prize. Like, I think right now Tuukka Rask is sitting here going, it's round 1 of the playoffs, and 2 games in,
I'm not feeling it.
Look, there's still a month and a half of this to go before you get to the Stanley Cup final, and I'm not feeling it now.
And
I'm never going to be feeling it.
I'm never going to criticize someone for, at this point, choosing health, safety, being with their family over hocky. I'm not going to criticize that.
Sure. Now, does it change the series? Sure, it does. I think it absolutely changes the series. And
I'm actually really excited to watch that. And I think we're actually going to wrap this up here because we're going to try to get this show up because Carolina-Boston starts at 12
sure.
o'clock.
I've
recording at 10:30.
Yeah, I've mentioned before that one of my buddies is a Boston fan, and I've mentioned it on here before. I'm supposed to be seeing him later today.
Okay.
So the intention was I'm not watching the game with him, but I'll see him afterwards. I'm really interested to see what comes of that because
I am too,
and what his thoughts are on it. Like I actually just saw him retweet the statement and just put "wow" on there, and now he's got the trolling mindset. He just tweeted, "I'm sure the reactions to this will be positive."
Oh, it's
which means that he knows exactly what's coming already, and it's and he can't stand that type of stuff. Like
Boston isn't exactly the most forgiving city.
Sure, and it's
especially when it comes to Tuukka Rask.
Well, but now, I guess to wrap this up too, in this sense,
yeah,
the dynamic on that series has changed. Washington is down 2-0 to the Islanders. Tampa's in for a battle with Columbus. I believe I said that series I have Tampa in 7 in that series. So
it's sure looking like it might go 7.
There is not a series on the east side. Well, I don't want to say it's not a series that looks like a cakewalk because boy, the Islanders look like they're dictating the way they want to play.
Barry Trotz knows some stuff.
Well, and oh, by the way, they just won. If we're going to be technical about it, not that it holds a whole lot of meaning in the bubble, but they just won 2 road games. So now Barry Trotz, who had to try to match lines as best as he could against Washington, gets first change. Yep. Or gets last change, I mean. So for the next 2 games.
Good luck.
So have fun with that, Washington. So imagine that. So 1 and 2 are in struggles where they're going to have to really pull it together to win the next 2, and 3 is 2 games away from being out, and number 4 just lost their number 1 goalie.
And it's also tied, right? Well, and we will see. We will see how these things shake out. We had a lot of news break during this show. We didn't miss the news for once. Don't forget.
Until the media availability later today when we maybe hear about Travis Konechny.
Right. We'll definitely get the whole lineup for tomorrow about 10 minutes after we finish recording here. But either way, that's going to do it for us today. Make sure to check us out on Tuesday because we will be live following the game on Facebook and maybe other places. We'll figure it out. And make sure to follow us on Twitter. Kevin's got the whole board behind him here. The show is move out of the way. The show is at YWT Podcast. Kevin's at Kevin_Durso. You can also find him at Flyerdelphia and at Sports Talk PHL. Make sure to go to sportstalkphilly.com. You can find articles from Kevin over there all the time, as well as the podcast. And until then, we got 2 games. We will see you after Game 3, after Game 4. We'll be back right after that. And then, in addition, we'll be back next Sunday, back to our normal recording schedule, depending what the Flyer schedule may or may not look like at that point. And until then, we'll see you Tuesday.